Welcome to the Fairhaven Artists Podcast Series on the South Coast Artist Index. Your host, Scott Bishop, will introduce you to the town's many historical and contemporary visual and performing artists. The Artist Index continues to bring you informative conversations about the historical artists and the contemporary makers, performers, supporters, and cultural impresarios. Fairhaven, Massachusetts is an integral part of the South Coast creative community. The Fairhaven Artists Podcast Series and the Fairhaven Performing Artists Podcast Series is sponsored in part with a grant from the Fairhaven Cultural Council, a local agency supported by the Massachusetts Cultural Council, a state agency.
Hi there, it's Scott Bishop for the Artist Index, and I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Kevin Grant from Wirelines. Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Can you tell our audience just a bit about yourself and the band?
Sure. I'm the singer and I write all the lyrics and all the vocal melodies and some of the other songs as well. Some stuff I write at home. We're all guys who've known each other for, in some cases, many decades since high school. And some of us have played together for many decades, but we'd never really gotten the chance to assemble like this, even though it had been something we talked about for a long time. We all have similar backgrounds in music, grew up in the same music scene in southeastern Massachusetts / Rhode Island. So we kind of already were keyed into the same wavelengths. This band is a bit different from stuff I've done in the past. I did have one band that was somewhat similar, but a lot of the other stuff I've done has been heavier or just different than this. And this is a lot closer to some of the stuff I grew up listening to and just never had an opportunity to play.
When did you get the band together?
Oh, we started 5 years ago. I believe that's right. I think 2019 was about when it happened. Our bassist, Ryan Parker, who's been one of my friends for many, many years, he and I had always talked about doing something, but we either lived in different cities or were tied up with different projects. The timing was never right. And then I ran into him at an open studio in New Bedford, and the timing was right. So we quickly grabbed Jeremy. Jeremy and Ryan had played together in a band that I saw a lot in high school called Third Age, and I had actually done backing vocals on one of their records way back in the early 90s. And then Ted I had worked with and known of his drumming and been a fan of his drumming for a long time. So I was really happy that he was free to do that. And so it's been interesting because we started right before COVID. So we've been together for 5 years, but really kind of 2.5 to 3 of those years, it was very tough to do the normal things that bands do, such as rehearse and play shows and make records. But we've managed to be very productive somehow.
So when you all decided to get together, was there a conversation about what kind of band this is going to be, or did you just get a room and start hashing stuff out?
Well, I had been in a band called the Judo Heirs, and Ryan Parker was a big fan of that band. And we all sort of like that style of kind of post-hardcore, I guess you'd call it. Melodic hardcore, kind of late 80s DC influenced stuff. So he kind of mentioned, why don't we take the idea of what was going on in that band and use it as a jumping off point, and then from there do whatever we want. So and that sound is sort of something that I think is pretty entrenched in the music scene that we've come out of. I guess, for lack of a better word, the hardcore music scene of this area was very much a lot of that melodic, melodic guitar playing and very similar to the style of what we play now, even though we try to bend the rules as much as we can with that. Something that we've always found it important to do is to continually plant our flags farther out from what we've been playing so that we never feel fenced in. I'm not interested in being in a band that's painted itself into a corner where if you do anything except this kind of rigid thing, you no longer sound like yourself. I thought from the beginning it was important to gift ourselves that freedom so that we will never get bored or run out of ideas, because we'll already have been a band that can do really slow, melodic, pretty things, or extremely fast things, or very poppy things, or very angular, hard to wrap your head around things. It allows us to not get bored, and hopefully the listener doesn't get bored as well.
I think a great example of that on The Tragic History of the Sea, which is your recent record, was Eels. Like right smack dab in the middle is this incredible change of pace after 5 or 6 of those kind of melodic post-hardcore songs, and then boom, you get that song. And it's such a great change of pace. When you craft a song like that, is it being conscious of like, we've done a bunch in this style, we need to do something different? Or is it just happenstance? You bring something in and it goes in that direction?
It's sort of happenstance. Jeremy brings ideas in of songs. Ryan brings ideas in, and sometimes it's just like a couple of riffs, and then we'll work together to fill it out. And then I will write and demo songs myself at home, knowing that I can't play them half as well as the rest of the guys in my band will end up being able to play them. But we try to limit my input to a couple of songs per record, because I don't have the musical ability to have that kind of diversity of the stuff that I want to do on a record as far as writing and playing on guitar, and those guys do. So I'll throw in my couple of songs, and then we'll kind of take their ideas and flesh them out and come up with something different. And sometimes, sometimes someone will just bring in something really pretty and slow, but because we've kind of given ourselves all that space, it's not something that we have to dismiss out of hand. When we work together on something, it's going to sound like wire lines at the end of the day, whether it's this really fast, brutal thing that we put together or something kind of psychedelic and slow and long. So that stuff kind of happens organically. I don't think we've ever pushed or been like, well, we don't have a slow one yet. We gotta write one.
Right.
Just kind of goes that way.
Is your writing process different when you're at home demoing versus when the other guys bring stuff in and now you're crafting a melody and lyrics to go with what they've created?
Yeah, it totally is. I kind of prefer writing with other people more. I think it brings out, it makes me better. I come up with better stuff that way, I feel. I'm not a good enough player to write complex things on a guitar or anything like that. So I tend to write kind of real pop songs almost, just because that's all I'm able to play. But when I work with other people, they're able to do things that I would like to do if I was a better guitarist. So, and I look at it as a problem solving thing. So they've created this piece of music, but it's missing parts, and I can go in like a technician and be like, okay, what are the parts missing to make this machine run? And I look at it that way, and that's a totally different way to write than when you just have a blank slate and you're like, okay, I'm going to come up with a song. So I like that element. I feel like I come up with things writing that way vocally that I never would do just writing songs of my own at home. And I do feel that it helps me lyrically as well, because they'll surprise me with stuff that they write, and they'll surprise me in a way that shakes loose different ideas that I might not necessarily come up with alone in a room.
I also found, listening to the record, to kind of speak to that everyone develops really interesting parts to advance the song. Your drummer, creates these really great parts. And we don't tend to think of the drum. We think of the drummer's just bashing stuff out, but, he's thought through his parts, not overthought them, just said, it sounds like I need to figure out what goes here to move the song forward. And everybody in the band seems to do that. It's clear from the record.
Yeah, he plays like there are drummers out there that just bash things out and that's it. And they're human metronomes or whatever. And sometimes that works for whatever you're trying to accomplish. But Ted doesn't play that way. He he plays almost like I don't know. It's hard to say things and not have them sound corny, but he's listening to the song. He's not just, I'm going to be this beat machine so everybody else doesn't have to keep time. He's really trying to come up with creative things to do and add these little flourishes and creative elements in there that really flush everything out, which is really nice. I've been in bands where guys just kind of threw down a beat and so you appreciate it when somebody's able to bring more than that to the table.
It reminds me, this is going to seem like a funny comparison, but like the Smiths, like everyone in the Smiths figured out a way to use their parts to help tell the story of that song. Mike Joyce, Marn, Morrissey, obviously, but everybody came in and crafted parts that made the song so much greater, and you can feel the storytelling in it. And I feel the same way about the record, that everybody's kind of helping tell the story of these songs with their individual parts and helping them mesh together.
Yeah, I agree. I don't feel like anyone is dead weight, and yet I don't feel like anyone really ever overplays or anything like that. It really works out well. It might be too busy if we were to add a second guitarist or something like that.
Yeah.
But
because even the things that you would call solos are not solos; they're melodic parts, which is another thing I loved about those guitar breaks. Is it's not somebody soloing; it's somebody thinking through, now how do I keep moving this song forward and telling this story?
Yeah, I agree, and that is, it's funny you mentioned the Smiths. We did a whole set of Smith songs one Halloween. Yeah, I don't know why we we love the Smiths, but those are not easy songs to learn.
No.
And then we only did it for one show. We recorded a couple of the songs that are floating around online, but it was a lot of fun to play those songs. And Jeremy, really everybody knocked out of the park, but Jeremy playing those Johnny Marr parts, it was like,
Morrissey needs two guys to play those parts when he tours, and Johnny Marr did it by himself, and it's amazing that Jeremy can do the same.
Yeah, he did a great
so
job.
Demanding and so great. Can you talk a bit about the making of the record? Because you made it in a weekend. It was all analog, so you recorded to tape. Can you talk a bit about the experience of recording and what went into crafting a full record?
So we've worked with Alex for our last two LPs, and Alex's studio is proud to record straight to tape, which is really nice. I've recorded to tape off and on throughout the years, but it's hard to find a place these days. It was a lot easier back in the day. A lot more people used tape. It wasn't always the best tape. It wasn't always like 2-inch tape. Sometimes it'd be 1/2-inch tape or whatever. But the tools that computers offer now it's driven a lot of people away from that skill. And it really is a much different skill set from the recording engineer standpoint to be able to edit on tape. And it's trickier as a band because it's a lot, digital is much more forgiving and you can do things a lot faster as far as like, well, you missed that part or whatever, but we'll just lift your vocals from that other chorus you did and we'll plop them in over here. You can't really do a lot of fun stuff like that on tape. So it's more of a challenge as a musician. You really have to be on your game when you go in, unless you want to spend a ton of money and aggravate everybody. So that was really fun for us and nice for us, especially because we knew it was going to be coming out on vinyl. So to have an analog process from beginning to end, I felt lent a certain nice level of integrity to it, I guess. And I had worked, I was lucky enough to make some records a long time ago with Steve Albini. And that was like the kind of pinnacle of working straight to tape. So it was really nice to return to that in a nice studio with a nice guy and my friends and our songs. I don't know what the future holds. Then, of course, there are still a lot of people working in tape, but I prefer working that way myself. Doesn't mean that I always will be.
Yeah, it's not always possible. As you said, I mean, there's just not a lot of studios doing it. But I think the thing that is clear from the record, I think this is probably the thing you got from working with Albini too, is that you get the sound of a band as opposed to what you get from digital, which is a lot of times everybody's doing their parts and it doesn't, it's still very good, but it's the sound of people perfecting their parts separately as opposed to a group in a room. And I'm sure there were some overdubs afterwards, but basically what you hear on the record is the band playing these songs, and it's a different experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I always have these, which comes first, the chicken or the egg arguments about whether a band is like when you play live, are you playing your record live for people, or is your record a version of your show that people could play whenever they want at home? And I don't know what the answer to that is. It's neither and it's both. But I do feel that we write these songs in a rehearsal space. There aren't any overdubs. We play them live in front of you. We don't bring any extra people up there. We don't add in all these bells and whistles. When you add all those overdubs and things like that in the studio, usually, at least for me, the goal is that you're trying to recreate the ambiance of being at a live show, because something about that just seems more physical and directed in front of you. And just a straight recording without some overdubs and all of that stuff somehow leaves you lacking from the experience of seeing a band live. And I don't know what it is about adding some of that extra layering. I think most people I think your average person doesn't even realize what an overdub is.
Yeah.
If you tell them, we did 4 guitar tracks on the record, they don't know what that means. You know what I mean? Like, so, but they would miss them if they were gone.
Right.
If your rhythm guitar dropped out every time your guitarist does a solo, it wouldn't sound good to them. They just wouldn't know why. So I think that when we personally, and when I'm in bands that do that sort of thing, it's not to be like, to make like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band or something. It's just, it's actually to make it sound more like we sound when we play live and not less, if that makes sense.
It makes sense because the experience of live you take in very differently. So I don't think you think about that stuff, but your experience of listening to a record, even if you expect the band to sound like they sound live, to recreate that, you actually have to fill it out more because you don't have the experience of being in a room and people are sweating and people are drinking beer and, somebody's shouting over the vocal or whatever. So all these other, I wouldn't call them distractions, but all the parts of the atmosphere are gone except the band. And that's where you need things to come and fill it in because you're lacking all that other sound that would be there in the room with you.
Agreed.
Did you go in saying we're going to record these 11 songs? Did you have other songs that were candidates?
No, we go in with a pretty tight game plan, and I've always preferred to work that way. I like to know, here are the songs, here are the order of the songs, another thing when you record to tape, and or when you're going to master for vinyl, you need to know that up front. Like, you can't, you're mastering for vinyl, you get one track for side A, one track for side B. The order of your songs is really important. And then I have to really think about the order I want to record the songs on, because I know that I'm going to be really trashing my voice throughout the process. So I have to be strategic about what order I'm going to record certain songs in. So I like to have everything completely thought out. I don't like to think about new ideas in the studio. I think that's what rehearsal's for, to screw. That's part of the writing process. I don't even like to record songs that we haven't played live a few times, because you'll come up with something cool live that you'll end up incorporating into the song and doing every time. So I do feel like part of the writing process is actually playing it live a bunch. And I feel really strongly about that. I think a lot of big bands start putting out mediocre records because they forget about that process. And it starts out from a place of economy and efficiency, because most musicians start out with not a lot of money, and it's like, all right, well, we're getting charged by the hour here. We need to have it together. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go in the studio. We're going to practice before we go in there. We're going to bang this thing out because we only have $1,000 or whatever. But that makes you a better player. And I think the people who go in when they no longer are under those constraints, you know, even bands that I like will go to the studio and they don't have any songs yet. And they write the record in the studio and they write 50 songs for the record. And then they whittle those down to 15, and then they change those, and then, you know, then they take a part from one song, they match it to another song. And I just think that's the worst possible way you could ever try to write a record. And meanwhile, it's kind of stock, standard way that people write records. I mean, it's how, like, you know, that awful Metallica documentary, that's how they're making that record. And, you know, that's how, you know, Aerosmith will spend 2.5 years making a record, and it's comes out the other end, it's absolutely terrible. And, you know, you need to not lose the plot of what it is to be in a band, where you show up once a week, you're together in the same room, you go over ideas, you practice, you work on new things, and then you get your songs for the record and you practice them. And if you can play them out live in front of some people, you do that too. And then you go in there absolutely as tight as you can be, and you bang them out. Because the more you play them in the studio, they're not going to get better. They're going to get worse and worse. Your first, your second, your third take, where you make it all the way through, those are going to be your keepers. And that's why you have, you know, the famous cliche, their demo was way better.
Yep.
Because it usually is.
Because you caught the spirit of it, and then you go into the studio and you start, you know, sanding off all the edges that made that spirit to begin with.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think of Bob Mould's memoir. You know, his band Husker Du in the 80s were always playing the songs that were going to be on the next record while they were touring for the current record. And in one case, got so far ahead of themselves, they were actually playing songs from 2 records that had Flip Your Wig while touring for, I think, Zen Arcade. And it's like, you know, that's what they did. They hammered out the songs in the rehearsal space. They took them on the road. They lived in them.
Yep.
Because I think that's the thing, living in them and getting to know them as a band and as individual players, so that when you go into that space, you know when you've got a take, you know when you've got the spirit, and you don't care if, you know, that fill wasn't perfect, or, you know, I was a little flat on that note. It's like nobody cares now because that's the take.
Yep.
We don't have time to do another. We're going to kill the spirit of it if we do it.
I agree. Yeah, you can overthink and over tinker these things to death, and eventually what you have is this you know, a song has its own, like, personality, and it demands its own respect. And, you know, if you just mess with it, it's like, you know, you're not treating it with the respect it deserves. So I think it's really important when you write music to just get out of the way. I mean that as the musician and somebody who writes, like, just get out of the way of the song. Like, let it just be there and happen, because it doesn't need you as much as you might think it does.
Yeah, I love that. I also think what's really good in a rehearsal context is if you can step back enough for everybody to just let themselves not only explore the song, but make mistakes. It's something I've had to learn to do, and it's been really great in my current band, because I can see the other guys feeling out the song, which I may know a lot better because I wrote it. And just like, you know what, I'm not going to give direction here because they're feeling this out. Too much direction early on is going to kill something they may come up with that I never could have thought of.
I agree. And that's, you know, something else I feel is that a band it's this Like, I don't ever want to be in a band that would sound like what I would do if I had a solo project. It's a meeting of, it's like a crossroads of these people all coming at it from different directions. And the beauty and the magic of your band is that intersection right there. And as long as you can still meet at an intersection, then you have an active and functioning band. And it should never be exactly what any member of the band would want. If it is, then it's really a solo project, or it should have been a solo project, because, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about writing, that magic happens when ideas are in between different people. It's a much different process than working on your own, because there's that unknown factor. Like, I don't know for sure what this person is going to do next. And that keeps me on my toes. And because they don't know what they're going to do next, I don't know what I'm going to do next either. And so at the end of the day, you come up with something wildly unexpected, and it's as refreshing and rewarding to you as it would be for someone else to hear it for the first time who wasn't involved in the songwriting process.
I mean, what you're describing is where the magic happens, because the magic is where things happen that can only happen between those people. It couldn't happen between two of them. It couldn't happen individually, only if you get them all together in the same space.
I agree. There's I believe it was, there's a songwriter, like, the Tin Pan Alley era. And this guy, I think it was Lawrence Hart, maybe. Anyway, I'm not sure about that, but he wrote, it was a collection of his lyrics that he published. And on the first page, he wrote something like, because these words were written to fit mosaically into pieces of instrumental music, any resemblance to poetry, living or dead, is purely coincidental. And that's true, and it's important. It's like the sum should be greater than the whole of the parts. And you only get that through collaborating, and that's the beauty of being in a band versus kind of doing your own thing or just having people support you.
Let's go back to your musical beginnings, because I'm curious, because you've been in bands for a long time. How did you get into performing music and creating music?
So when my parents bought their first house, we had lived in tenements. They bought a house, and we lived in Fall River. And our next door neighbor, we moved in, and I was 4 years old, and my sister was 2. And they had a piano that nobody played in their house. And they said, if you guys will pay to move it across the driveway to your house, you can have it. So my parents did that. And about a year later, I started taking piano lessons, and I took piano lessons until I was a teenager, mostly playing like classical and jazz stuff. And I was a member of the Piano Players Guild of America. So every year I would have to, like, a judge would come to my teacher's house, and I'd have to play a selection of music. And if I played it and scored high enough, I would continue to be in the guild and move forward or whatever. But I don't play very much anymore, but it gave me enough understanding of kind of music basics that when I saw a guitar hanging around or a bass hanging around and I picked it up and I messed with it a little bit, I was able to figure out rudimentary things because I kind of understood how notes work together. So I could hack my way through on a lot of different instruments. And I started playing in bands in high school. Also in high school, I was really interested in acting, and I thought I might want to be an actor. And so I started trying out for a lot of plays, which in high school are all musicals. And I was getting a lot of good parts, but I realized it wasn't because anyone thought I was any good as an actor. It was because they thought I could sing. So and I hated musicals, hated them. So I'm like, well, this is not going to work. But I was also, I got into skateboarding around like 10 or 11 years old. And that for me was a gateway drug into alternative culture across the board. And, this is the mid 80s and pre-internet, obviously. So skateboard videos and skateboard magazines were sort of our culture crash course. And you would end up, it was kind of this thing where like, well, if you liked the Sex Pistols, you would probably also be into the Smiths, and you'd probably also be into Public Enemy, and you'd probably also be into Dead Can Dance. And these things weren't considered separate for us. It was all just kind of underground music and not what was on the radio. And we were really interested in all of that because, like skateboarding, it just showed you there's more to life than what surrounds you. There's a lot of people doing very interesting, unorthodox things out there in the world that are it's out there for you to experience and enjoy, and also shows that you may not have as many constraints on yourself and what you're going to do with yourself as you might have thought you did. There are examples out there where you have a lot more freedom to express yourself than maybe you would ever supposed. So I played in bands from middle school. At middle school, I had a band called the Brain Dead Geniuses. And then I was in a band in high school called Cereal Toys. And then in college, I was in a band called Merrick. Then I came back home and I was in a band called GASKILL. And then Exposed Human Sharks. And then The Hidden. And then Iron Oak. And then Judo Heirs. And then Blackhouse. And then Wire Lines. And that's about it.
And stylistically, what are the threads that carry through those bands, if there are any?
Tough to say. I mean, a lot of it's kind of, I guess you'd call it post-punk or post-hardcore. Gaskill was more of like a thrash band, but elements of kind of noise rock too. Judo Heirs was melodic hardcore. Blackhouse was all basses, 3 bass players, a drummer, and myself singing. There's not really a thread. I want to do lots of things and I have limited time. And if I had more time to be in more bands, I would, and they'd all be different. Like I'm not interested in repeating myself or in emulating the past or trying to do things that have been done. I want to do things like I'm not even interested in what I'm doing today. I want to be doing what I'm going to be doing tomorrow or the next year or something like that. And I feel like that was something about punk rock that appealed to me, was that it was this kind of controlled burn in the forest all the time. So you're going in and you're just going to lay waste to everything so that now you have a lot of space to restart and rebuild and do something new and refreshing. But then when that becomes its own forest, it's time to torch that again and let's do something new now. So the stuff that I always liked was, Public Image Limited coming out of the Sex Pistols, or, the Clash going in the direction that they did. And just these people who were like, okay, this is what I've done, so I don't never have to do that again. Now I can do something else. Or here's what other people did, and I like some elements of that, but I'm going to take that and do that in a new way. And I think it's important. If I'm going to do something, I either want to say something new in an old way or something old in a new way. And I'm not interested in anything else. So I guess the one thread would be that none of my bands have been extremely successful or made a lot.
But none of them have been the same as the others, too, because of that push to do something different.
That's correct.
Having been in Wirelines for 5 years, how do you keep pushing to do something different in the context of the band?
Well, like I said, that was important to me from the get-go, and everybody in the band agreed with me. We've all played lots of different things, and we're interested by lots of different things. And we want to be able to do lots of different things in this band rather than be like, I kind of want to do slow stuff. I guess I better start a slow project.
Yeah.
Or like, I want to do something really like insanely aggressive and out of control. I guess I need to start a side project for that. I wanted to have this big tent where we could do whatever we wanted. And if we did that from the get-go, people would associate us with being guys capable of doing that. And so I would be hard pressed. Like, I don't think we would ever do a rap song or a country song, and probably not a reggae song, although there's probably elements of dub stuff and some things that we've done. But other than that, I mean, I feel like we've gifted ourselves that ability to do what we want and not have it sound out of character, because that is our character. Our character is this kind of tropical rainforest of sounds.
What's next for Wirelines?
So we tend to slow down a lot around the holidays for all the obvious reasons. We're all dads, and we all have actual jobs. And so we're in a slowdown period right now. When we come out of the slowdown period, we'll be in a writing period. I will be looking to play some shows. We'll see what happens. Whatever comes our way. I mean, we get offers here and there. Right now, we're looking at some dates that have been thrown our way, but I'm really excited to start writing again. We haven't written any new songs since the stuff we wrote for A Tragic History of the Sea. Although I've demoed some stuff, and I think I've got 2 or 3 songs that I've demoed at home and shown to the band that will be on the next record. And we've kicked around some riffs, but we haven't like finished, like, okay, this is a song, vocals done, beginning, middle, end, it's ready to go. We don't have any of those done yet, because even the stuff I demoed, those guys are going to take it and make it something good versus
take it apart, put it back together again.
Yeah. I bring them meat and potatoes of a song, and they fix it up.
They season it.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the slowdown, the holidays. What are some other ways that you find that balance as, being in a band, being a dad, having a career? Because it can be quite the juggling thing.
Yes, I think the key is to be aware that people need time off. It's just like anything else. I mean, it's got to be enjoyable for all of us and something that we all look forward to doing. And if that means we take 3 months off, then we take 3 months off. And if that means we get offered to play a show that is in the Midwest, or like will require jumping on an airplane, and for one of us that's going to create like major problems, then we just don't do it. I don't want to be burning out. I don't do this because I've never made music looking to make it my career, not because I don't think it's important enough. It's because I think it's too important for that, honestly. It's more of a vocation than something that I feel like I need to be beating down doors and smashing people over the head with my records about. So that means that you have to be selective and do it in a way that it remains joyful for everyone involved to take part. And I've been lucky enough to know some people who are in pretty successful bands, and some of those will say, hey, there's times where we don't practice. If we practice once every 2 years, that's a lot for us.
Wow.
And then they'll get together and work really hard and write a record and put it out, and or go on tour for a year or whatever. It's important to be able to walk away. I look at I look at bands a lot like cars. Like I've been in a whole bunch of bands and I've owned a whole bunch of cars. And if I still own the cars, I might not drive them for a few years. I can only keep so many of them on the road at once. But it doesn't mean if I didn't feel like investing the time and the energy, I couldn't get any of them running again. And they're all better for certain things than other things. And some of them look good and some of them are great in snow and whatever. So that's the thing with the band is, you can't wear it out. Sometimes you just got to like put it down, walk away from it, let things rest, and then come back when everybody's psyched on it. And I feel like those bands that have that mindset last a long time. And if you're in a band where you're like, what the hell? Like, this is the second week the drummer couldn't make practice. I'm done with this band. Well, then you're never going to be in like a functioning long-term band. You're just not. That's not how it should work, and that's not how it ever works. So you got to be forgiving. You got to be patient. You got to understand that you're all in it together. And if one person has a problem, then you need to just all chill out till everybody's on the same page.
You've got a young son. Has he gotten to see you perform in wire lines? And what's his reaction if he has?
He has seen me once, but it was quite a while ago and he was very young. And I think not really quite comprehending it, probably. Right. He's heard our records more than, it's a lot to wrap your head around when you're little. And, a lot of our shows are taking place in
bars and things
dens
like
of iniquity clubs. At 2 a.m. Yeah. So, but I look forward to him being able to come out to some shows, all ages ones or earlier ones.
We got to get some of those going. New Bedford can be good for that, which is good. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask, is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, I don't know. I think maybe the last thing that I would say is that there's always this talk, even amongst a lot of my musician friends, that, rock and roll is dead. And, no kids are listening to rock and roll anymore. And that's just patently false. I find that young kids, my son, for instance, my daughter, any high school in America, these kids are really into and discovering lots of old rock and roll, lots of current rock and roll, lots of underground stuff. And it's easy to forget that, when you're 40 or 50 or 35 or 60, that you're not going to know what kids are doing or not doing. There's tons of underground basement shows all over the place. There's tons of new bands, great new bands. They're out there, but you're not their demographic. So that's why you don't know about them. And if you drive by any bus stop, where the kids are going to school or coming off of school, you're guaranteed to see some Black Sabbath t-shirts and Thin Lizzy t-shirts. And, yes, there's a lot of garbage on the radio, but you know what? No less so than when I was a kid in 1987, or even frankly, 1991, when supposedly with rose tinted glasses, we think that everything was wonderful all of a sudden, because grunge happened. And you forget that, the top of the charts was MC Hammer doing the Addams Family 2 rap song. Yep. That was like a #1 song. There was absolute trash dominating the airwaves, but you don't want to remember those, so you don't. You think only about the good stuff that happened when you were a kid. American pop culture has been hot garbage since day one. It always will be, but there always will be people doing interesting things on the fringes, and that includes the kids, and they're all doing it. We're some of the elder statesmen on the label that we're on, and there's some great bands on Blind Rage Records who are nice enough to put out our albums. They're all young people doing really cool, interesting things. They're not worshiping the past. They're not trying to be people who they are not. They're speaking from the heart, and they're doing it in the same way that people have always done this and will always do it. So I guess that would be my my last thing that I would want to say.
All righty. I endorse that. Having worked in commercial radio back in the late 80s through the mid 90s, I blocked out most of the crap I had to play, but there was a lot of it.
It sure was.
Always is. All right. I've got 5 questions of unknown origin for you.
Okay.
I like to ask all my musician friends these questions. Let's start with, what is your first musical memory?
That would probably be my mom singing to me when I was a toddler or a baby. Both my parents sang a lot in the house. My dad was a much better singer than I will ever be.
Oh, yeah? You're a damn good singer, by the way.
Thank you.
So that's high praise for your dad. What's one record you take to Desert Island? Must-have record.
Probably the self-titled first Bad Brains record.
Who's a super sneaky secret influence? Somebody that nobody would peg as an influence for you.
Eddie Money.
Okay, you got to tell me more.
I like Eddie. I like Eddie Money a lot.
Great singer.
I'm not kidding.
Great singer.
Because he was in a lot of ways, and I know that people think, well, this was all done on purpose by these suits, and probably some of that is true, but he was an anti rock star. He did not have a great voice. He wasn't that handsome. He wasn't very cool.
He was an ex-cop.
Yeah, he was a former. He was in he was a police cadet and then quit, and came from a family of Irish cops. But with all of those things against him, and this was already in the video era. He started before that, but looks had become like everything, and style had become everything, and he didn't even have like vocal ability to overcome that stuff. But he refused to be taken as a joke. Like, he wasn't making novelty songs like Huey Lewis and the News, who also was a guy who, was not going to be a teen heartthrob and didn't have this like 7-octave range or anything. He sang songs that were heartfelt, and it came from a lot of a power pop background in a lot of ways. It was like minorly punk influenced. And so I appreciated that. He was like a sort of a genuine underdog kind of guy.
He also knew what his voice could do and couldn't do, which I think has made him a great singer for what he did, because he always knew what songs were going to work for how he sang. He never got outside. I mean, there's something to be said for getting outside your lane, but when you have certain limitations, there's also the wisdom of staying in that lane and knowing how to work it to your best ability.
There are far worse albums to listen to than Eddie Money's greatest hits. And when you look at the track listing, you're like, oh my God, he actually had
he had a lot of hits,
20 huge hits that I know like the back of my hand, but I never think about it because it's 2024. But anyway, that's probably my weird influence.
Wild. All right, last question. What is your South Coast happy place?
It's tough. We really like driving around in the summertime. Westport, Tiverton, Little Compton area. We also love going out to the islands. I love Horseneck Beach, but I love Block Island and Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket and stuff like that. And island life is really weird. I really like the people who live there year round. They're tough people. It's almost like going to a foreign country because they have to be very self-reliant, and you never know if the boats are even going to run in the winter months. And I like all that. I love where I live. I love where we live. I love that we have great, beautiful beaches, and then we get to go sledding. And we have beautiful autumns and beautiful spring, and I like all of that. And I hate being away from the ocean. I was in Atlanta for Thanksgiving, and we talked about that with some of the folks that we met out there. And if I think about it too hard and I'm away from the coast, it's almost like a claustrophobia. I just want to be near the open water. So yeah, that's it. Maybe just the ocean is my happy place.
Nice. Kevin, thanks so much for taking time out to talk. I'm looking forward to whatever Wirelines does next. So,
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your interest in taking the time to talk to me.
You've been listening to the Fairhaven Artists Podcast Series on the South Coast Artists Index with your host, Scott Bishop. The Fairhaven Artists Podcast Series and the Fairhaven Performing Artists Podcast Series is sponsored in part with a grant from the Fairhaven Cultural Council, a local agency supported by the Massachusetts Cultural Council, a state agency.